Well, hello, welcome to Java with John, MAISA's new webinar that connects Michigan's ISD leaders over a virtual cup of coffee. I'm your host, John Severson, and today we're kicking off our second episode. And before we get our guests started here, I want to share a few things about our association. First, our mission is to empower ISDs as champions of student success and public education. And today we will be focusing on the impact of early childhood education and how to support emerging leaders and learners across the state of Michigan. So, as always, if you're new to this role, we're here to help you. We understand you're learning a lot at this time, and today we have a unique chance to hear from an experienced educator who is committed to achieving the best educational results for all Michigan students. So for today's episode, I'm thrilled to welcome Mrs. Amy Brower, and she's MAISA's Early Childhood Administrators Network, ECAN Director, and Early Literacy Professional Learning Pre-K Coordinator, and former educator. And the list is so long, Amy, so we want to welcome you and joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here and share about my passion for early childhood.
Well, we know you have an amazing professional journey. We'd like to hear first about that. And what does our association mean to you?
Sure. So interestingly enough, I actually started out my career in secondary education as a Spanish teacher. I'm also certified in psychology, so spent some years there. But I've always had a passion for early childhood, starting from babysitting through working in childcare through my college years, and just kind of threw me back there when I applied for our Great Start Collaborative coordinator position. And that was at St. Joseph County ISD. I spent 13 years there. My last role there as the early childhood director, and really covered lots of programs like Early Head Start, GSRP, early on, and then, overseeing the Great Start Collaborative back again in that role. Within that, though, then as my last 4 years in that role, also got to participate in the Early Child Administrators Network, also known as ECAN. And that was just a really great opportunity for me to network with others around the state, and really support and lean into that systems level work. I think that's an area that I have a passion about as well, is really understanding how all of those things interplay and what can we do that to support children and families in our state. And then when this opportunity opened up for the ECAN director, I jumped on it. We had some family shifts and looking for something different. And so was excited that that was an opportunity and that I could join this team, and really around supporting leaders that were my past self, and really understanding what they might need in a different way. So.
Well, we're so fortunate to have you on our staff, and I know the work that you're doing and the collaboration across the state. And so could you describe a little bit more about ECAN and share the fabric of what that looks like across Michigan right now?
Yeah, so as a network, as you know, the superintendents will elect or support one of their early child administrators to participate in that network. It varies across ISDs, with differing roles and differing programs that shift depending on where you're located and what funds are available. But primarily, we see those early childhood directors participating. We develop a network plan, really focusing on collaboration, professional growth, strengthening our network opportunities. And I think a really key piece, as I was talking about those systems level changes, is really thinking about that statewide coordination and advocacy. Really thinking about what can we come around and have that collective impact so that we're providing the most high quality services and effective practices in our early childhood field. This year, some of our major focus areas are going to be preschool special education and early on, particularly supporting inclusive opportunities for our youngest learners. And then, of course, I'm sure all of you are thinking about pre-K for all. So we're in the middle of that level of expansion. And so we're really leaning into that space and figuring out, what are those best service models in that mixed delivery system? How can that be supported? Knowing that each of our ISDs and communities are unique. So ECAN in general, though, really is looking at how can we have that collective impact, knowing that we need that flexibility to meet those local community needs, while leaning into a space that really provides that direction and support across all of those varying models.
I think that collective impact, for our listeners is really important, especially when you consider, people who are coming to this network and representing their ISD can have, different backgrounds. You talked about your background today, and it may be different than someone else. And the tools and the challenges, what I'm really proud of is the ECAN director aligning that and bringing that group together to solve some very difficult problems. I think as we look at the future, it's really important to look at those foundations you talked about early on, and our partnership with MyLeap is part of that work, and MDE and our districts. I think of this as we're preparing kids for kindergarten, right? And so, what do you believe is the impact of early childhood education has on kids entering kindergarten? Why is that so important? And what do you see across the state?
Well, I think what comes to mind initially is that we've had studies both for GSRP and Head Start, even on a national scale, that really shows the effectiveness of those programs. There's also just the research out there about, our return on investment when we provide that level of support, and opportunity access for kids. We're seeing their own growth and really coming to that kindergarten setting with additional skills that we're hoping to see. The other part that I really wanted to center on there is really thinking about those Great Start collaboratives. I think that's a really unique opportunity, both locally and statewide, to really think about how can we ensure that kids are born healthy, that they're thriving and developmentally on track from birth to third grade, that they're ready to succeed at the school entry, and that they're prepared to succeed in fourth grade by reading proficiently at the end of third grade. So thinking about those four outcomes that we have as a state and what can we do locally that meets our needs. So I think those areas
Yeah.
really lean into impact to both ourselves locally and then, what we might see statewide.
And, we know the difference too of a child who has those experiences and one that doesn't, what that looks like. As a former ISD superintendent, the Great Start Collaborative meetings were my favorite meetings to go to because I could hear this collective energy focused on all children in the county. And, I think of new leaders and current leaders. This is a space that you need to keep on your radar. We know when children don't have those experiences, they're really starting behind as they start kindergarten. As part of that, could you talk a little bit about the difference between early childhood, birth to 8, and kindergarten in terms of educational programming and standards?
Yeah, so one thing that always popped to my head is when you think about culturally where we sit, if a child turns 5, what happens? They go to kindergarten. Everybody knows that, it's widely accepted, and then you just have to figure out where's my school. When you think about that birth to 5 range, that is not going to look the same. So we're really on the front lines trying to find those families. How do we get them into our programs? We're always in recruitment mode. And a lot of times it's, when I've talked to families in the past, like, oh, we just didn't know that was available. So really thinking about access and recruitment in that way. So that's something that it is often a little bit different around kindergarten when we're thinking about those programming. And I think saying that in the same way is that, not every child goes to all of the programs. So some are need focus like early on. Are we looking at a developmental delay or a disability? Then how do we find those families? Or we have preschool. So we're seeing that get, much broader and able to serve more kids. We also have strong beginnings. So now we have these pockets of pilots to serve 3-year-olds. So we're really seeing some investment in the state. But when I think about how that differs from kindergarten, is really thinking about that there are going to be some level of entry criteria to get into some of those programs. And then we're really thinking about how can we best meet those needs and find those hard to reach families. And the only other thing I wanted to say about that is often, like, when we're in this space, this is the first time they're meeting someone from like a formal school setting. So we want to make sure we have we're presenting ourselves for that first impression, and helping those families in the best ways possible.
As a former K-12 superintendent and ISD superintendent, I found that when I would visit those programs, especially when they were doing their open house or some event, they're going to be my future students, right? They're your future students. And it's really important to see them as part of the whole system, not that we wait till we get them at kindergarten. What are we doing, upstream? You and I talk about that a lot. What things are we doing in the forefront? And I also know that some areas have struggles with space, and a district might have space and has to make a decision. And I really believe ISD can come alongside them to really have good conversations about not losing any program to another, trying to have as many options as possible. So to throw you a curveball here, are you seeing some of those challenges in part of the state, or what do you see that's kind of working that might help a listener say, I need to approach it as a system and look at all my resources in my community? What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, so we're definitely seeing challenges with space, and it's not that space may or may not be available when we're thinking about a scale up of any preschool or childcare program. It is also layering in the licensing that goes along with that. So the additional inspections that need to happen, and the space and the time that goes into scaling that up. So yes, there are times that there aren't things available. So I always think about how can we be innovative in that? So, and what else? Are there maybe church spaces that would give it to you for a lower reduced cost? You're still going to have to go through that licensing process, but really starting to think outside the box, so that we can scale up that program. And the other thing I would encourage people to do is really look at, what is our estimated number of 4-year-olds that could get to this particular space? Because sometimes that's what we see, is that we're oversaturated in one area, but we don't have enough space in another. So we really have to think about that, and then really start looking at, okay, where are these kids living and coming from? Because parents, for the most part, either need transportation, so we're going to need to get the kids there, or if they're in other situations are like, where's that drop off? How does that look in the mix of everything else in my life? Is it on my way to work? How far is it from work, or is it closer to home? So I think leaning into maybe some uncomfortable space for people, but to get, as many ideas to the table, and then trying to figure out what works best for your community, focused on where the kids are and what they can get to.
And you just hit a really important spot here to think about. The network, the ECAN network, is a place to have some of these tough discussions too, to see what other people are doing. And leading into this question, tell us about some of the programs and services you're seeing across the state, and that are maybe initiatives that are very different or exciting, or anything that you can bring to share with what's happening across Michigan right now.
Sure. So when I'm thinking about maybe I think the thing that popped in my head first was leaning into preschool inclusion again. So that's just a passion area of mine. So if you get to talk with me at other times, just know we're probably going to talk about that. I'll be ready. But I think there's some statewide work that needs to happen in regard to policy. So we're all well aware of that. In the meantime, what else can we be doing and looking for those models where we're seeing success in including kids in their programming? When at St. Joseph County ISD, that's something that we did, and we visited Newaygo
Mm.
because they had a very robust inclusion model and see how they did it. And that includes looking at, the financial pieces and then the human resource pieces. We went through that whole process to really see what is working best, and then how could we do that within our community. And I would say that's definitely a space we lean into at ECAN. Is really, over the summer when we had our retreat, we created this spreadsheet called Innovative Ideas. And if you ask any of them about it, I talked about it the entire time. Put that on the list. One of them that pops in my head from that particular space was the whiteboard IEPs. So we've seen some really great success with that, and people really wanted to know and understand about that. Um, and then the other thing is you watch our stories from the field. So we've been sending those out monthly, and those are areas where you're going to get ideas and, think about how that might be look at within your community. So those are, I guess, some of the things, initiatives that kind of popped in my head as you asked me about that.
I think too, for our superintendents who are maybe new or currently in this work, who haven't really looked at this again, early childhood, I think the partnerships. Could you talk about the partnerships and the collaboration, and how do you work with partners to fulfill this work across the state? What are you seeing with that? And I know you talked about Great Start Collaboratives, but what else are you seeing out there on partnerships and collaboration?
Yep. So what I would say to start us off is to say early childhood is complex and we can't do it alone. So we often have many partners at the table. When I discussed earlier, like we're going out to find kids, that's usually our first question is where are the kids and the families? So meaning that are they in a program that maybe we operate? That's an easier touch point for us. But maybe they're working with Department of Health and Human Services. Maybe we can access
Mhm.
them through pediatricians. So we really think about it in that broad range and that holistic aspect of what partners might need to come to the table so that we can best serve families together. At the state level, then I certainly think about MyLeap in that space. They come to all of our ECAN meetings and provide an update. Sometimes we ask for specific things. They're also very great partners with us, asking for our feedback, if they've drafted something and we want to be able to do that. So we definitely have a strong feedback loop there. Um, Internally, though, we've also, I think, hiring in the or this ECAN director role has been really helpful to really understand what else is happening amongst the other
Mm.
networks, and that spurred some work together this year. So when I think about working with SEILN, and we're have members from both on that preschool special education, thinking about inclusion, but we're also thinking about our ECSE programming and our early on programming. So we're coming together around that. Within that, we also did a broader scope and really looked at who else needs to be at the table. So we have members from MAISE, MDE, MyLeap. There were some LEA and PSAs that were on those too. So thinking about, how that might impact us all, and then ensuring that we have the right people at the table. So I think partnership and collaboration in this space is extremely important, and we know we can't do it alone.
Yeah, I just wanted to accent too, and we really appreciate MyLeap. We've worked with them in a number of situations to help us really turn the licensing around or solve problems very quickly. And I really believe ECAN and all of the members of ECAN have been a big part of that. And you all have established this amazing relationship. Well, Amy, we have a few more questions, and one of the most important ones I have for you is talk about the benefits to families. Sometimes we think of ourselves, but our benefits to our families and our communities, these early childhood programs.
Uh, Excuse me. Yeah. So when I was thinking about this earlier, I was really focused on a couple stories. One, when I was overseeing early Head Start, I got a desperate call from a parent. I need childcare and I don't know where to go. And I said, okay, we walked through the process. I learned from the family the children are actually in foster care. So we actually have this early Head Start program, be a great fit for you. Um, and interestingly enough, they had called that center separately, and this center didn't have any spots, which is true, but they did have some early Head Start spots. So we worked with them, got everything that they needed, and the parent was able to go back to work. The the part of that was, oh, I guess, touched me more than anything. They were in the process of fostering 6 kids in that family,
Oh, wow.
and so we started out with the littlest one, but eventually all 6 kids ended up there, so they were able to kind of continue down that path and get their needs met. When childcare is such a uh, scarce resource in our communities, having those connections can be so um, impactful for families. So I think, when we think about those in-seat programs, GSRP, Head Start, Early Head Start, you're going to see things like that where we're really meeting a family's needs, on top of getting the extra benefits of an educational program that helps get them set up for kindergarten. And there's a lot of family support and a lot of our early childhood things, which I think is a really great like showcase of the work that we do. Because, infants and toddlers need advocates, and that's usually comes through their family voice. So, um,
I think ISDs also helped establish this maybe a first relationship with the parents of what school will be like for their children. And if we have a really good start, it really sets the stage, right, for kindergarten. And I know so many of our ISDs work incredibly hard to help in that transition. So if you thought of something for our new superintendents to navigate this space, and it might be very new to them, or they might be a regular at this, but maybe some things to think about, what would you share that would be really important?
Yeah, so I would say meet with your early childhood director or administrative team, whatever that looks like, regularly to really deepen your knowledge around what is working well and what challenges there might be within that early childhood space. Because as a strong group, we're going to come back to you and say, we need XYZ. And so to really have a good understanding of what we're asking for, so you can see that through the scope of your lens as a superintendent. And things I thought about might be maybe do a little data tour. How many kids are we serving in early on? What is the impact that we're having? Think in GSRP, you could do the same. And everybody's landscape is a little bit different. So you're going to even have to understand what you
Right.
have. As an example, I know one of our UP sites owns and operates some early childhood infant and toddler centers. So the investments can look different. And so that would be another opportunity is to talk to your ISD peers as superintendents and what is the scope of what they have within that birth to 5 range. So I think those are kind of some thoughts or ideas around, really deepening that learning and understanding. And the last thing I thought was just get out and see the programs. What do they actually do day to day? What does that early on home visit actually look like? Things like that can really help understand the impact that we're having in this early childhood space.
And I know some ISD superintendents also have their early childhood director on their cabinet.
Yes.
So they get up to speed information. And I believe that was one of our outcomes from a summit that we did with early childhood work, to incorporate them more as part of your administrative team or cabinet, just so you can hear those conversations. So I know, Amy, we were on a tight timeline today, but I know a number of folks are advocating for a better budget. We're doing our very best in that approach across the state. There are numerous ECAN members and superintendents who are advocating just as hard for GSRP and the private programming, because we know our children need as much of this support before they start kindergarten. So I wanted to, really thank you for everything you do. We're so fortunate to have you at MAISA, and I just say keep being amazing. We just appreciate and are very thankful of you.
Yep. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure to be here. And, for the audience, whether you're physically here or you see this later, I'm happy to support you in any way. So feel free to reach out at any time.
Well, I want to say to our guests, we have an email link called Java with John at gomaisa.org. So you can connect with us or visit our website at gomaisa.org. So we have plenty of information there as well. And I want to say that all of the work that we talked about, you touched on how we mobilize people, we embrace change, we diagnose and adjust, we adapt leadership to practice. All of these things are so important. They're concepts of adaptive leadership. And you really hit the mark on so many pieces of this as ECAN keeps looking forward. So until next time, keep leading and serving with vision and passion. And remember, we are better together. Thank you.